Hello, I'm Tyler Edlin with 3dbuzz.com, and in video 11 part 1 I'll be starting the final character concept. And in this part I'll take you all the way through to the basic color block-in. Alright, so picking up where we left off, I have the drawing and a tone background, which I'm going to add more color on right now with a large airbrush. And this part is entirely up to personal taste and preference. I just didn't want the character to be against a pure white background. So I'm just using a little bit of kind of like contrasting colors with kind of like the burgundies and slight blues and magentas just around the character to accent her silhouette. And I always like having the floor a bit lighter, like light is shining down. It's a slightly dramatic effect, but seems to work for most of the cases here. And that's just a basic block in. You can spend as much time as you have or want to on the background like that. And so now I just, I believe on a layer below the drawing one, I just start blocking in what I feel the colors might end up being. And when doing that, I'll always think of the value first, and then kind of like the temperature of the color, and then the actual color itself. So that's kind of like the hierarchy my mind works when selecting colors for the characters. And these are based off the color schemes I was coming up with a few videos ago. So just a little bit of color there to indicate that's where some skin is, to remind me. I was thinking, is this going to be an arm? Now I'm going to go with, I think I'm going to go with white gloves and white boots to kind of mirror that. That hand's going to need some work a little bit down the road, but for now I'll just keep pushing it. Yeah, see, they got my color reference out there to kind of help guide me in this in the earlier stages. And basically what I'm doing at this phase as well is a lot of the designing. I didn't have kind of like a final drawing, you notice, to go off of at this stage. I just have all the thumbnails and the comprehensive sketches to go off of, so I can just kind of pick, I let it sit overnight, and I can kind of more or less decide my favorite aspects of those and integrate them all into this one final design. The only thing that was final drawing wise that I was going in more or less was the pose. Even that, I had some work to do left on it. See, this is what I want to talk about too. Even when I have a suit like this that is white, the trick is, and the challenge is, to not paint it purely with white. Like, if this is going to be white, I want to make it up with several subtle hue changes. So that's how I kind of have, and it's kind of easier when it's to do that when it's not on a pure white background, because the white can be, depending on the material, actually can be picking up part of the colors from the character's environment. So now I'm just gonna, I got, bits of the character blocked in. I'm just gonna go in and do some rendering. This will either be extremely boring for some people to watch because it takes the most time, or this is where some of you will really get interested to see how how I actually paint some of these things out. And now I'm using this kind of square chalk brush. I will include all my brushes with the tutorial to download, so you can try some of these out if you haven't already. I have my brushes free all over online, so just Google Tyler Edlin brushes if you need to. Let's see, I'm going with a cooler red behind her to kind of emphasize the wrapping of the form, and then I'll kind of paint the light onto it. That's how I generally approach things. And sometimes it doesn't work, but most of the time I kind of have better luck with just kind of painting things darker first as a darker base tone, and then kind of adding the light onto it. And right now, I'm figuring out these folds. I'm just looking at that reference I had over on Pinterest from a few videos ago, that these ladies in the more or less like the cyberpunk-ish style scarves had. I'm just kind of basing this off that. I'm not an expert at making up how folds work, so that's why I do the research. And it's through your research that I can, or through my research, I can get some credibility here and make it look like I know what I'm talking about. And I think that's where I see a lot of novices or beginners really don't do enough, is they don't put in the time to research. They open up a canvas and just start painting. They'll post it in the forums, groups, so we can share it, and they're like asking for help, but it's like they didn't even do some base research to see what they were painting and stuff, and they're just like, hey, help me, what do I do? It's like, well, take some initiative and look up what you're trying to draw. That's just like my biggest pet peeve with that. It's just, nobody's an expert on everything. I'm not an expert on everything. Most people aren't. You just, like every other job out there, you have to do your research to make something accurate. And there's no shame in that. Now, I'm keeping in mind the material of the scarf like a little bit in the back of my head, just because it's not reflective. Now, after I have the base blocking of the form, then I move on to start considering the texture. And this is just a kind of like a color scattering brush I'm using. It's just adding a little bit of color variety into the scarf now. You can see it switches things up, adds like greens and oranges in there. It gets very loose, very textury though on the edges of it, so you have to do a few passes with it, or smooth or smudge it out, depending on what you're looking for. And so I kind of leave that as it is, call it good enough for now, and just start exploring elsewhere. And I'm looking at kind of showing how I can. And this is kind of like a tied outfit, but I'm not really sure at this point how to perfectly show the form rendered on it, so that's kind of what I'm working with now. Trying to keep the white, not white, but still show form on it. So it's kind of like a mix of cool off-whites and warm off-whites, depending on the shadow or where the light is hitting. I have the pixels locked on the layer too, I believe, so I can't paint out of the out of bounds so off the character. Really, I think I do anyway. And I'm just trying to make the color a little bit more interesting by having cooler highlights or accents. That's why I use the blue. Trying to show the rib cage. I don't think I show. I think I show too much, and I end up ultimately fixing it. But I believe I'm just kind of taking my time and relaxing, exploring some of the form changes. So yeah, I had the underdrawing, and I'm referencing that, trying to make some shadows underneath the breast. If you have a bounce light too, it really helps the forms when you can show that in parts of the shadow as well. I haven't got to that yet, but I just thought I'd make note of it now. I was just trying to, up on the top of the left breast there, I was trying to show cast shadow by the arm, as if the light's kind of nearly right over her. I'm drawing all these the anatomy contours on this suit as if it's that tight, but it really isn't. My apologies. This is how you just learn. That's through trial and error. It definitely helps to have the anatomy underdrawing though, because for anyone that's not a pro at it, any anatomy, including myself, it just really helps as a guide to reference. Still using that one same brush I had with it. I blocked in the scarf. Then going back in and blending a little bit of it. I mean, I just stick to a few different brushes. I kind of have a large set, but I don't necessarily use them all. And if you want to make really clean edges, then the selection marquee tool or masking is definitely the way to do that. And it's always good to have, like, edge control is one of the harder things to practice, and it does take just a lot of experience or time to commit. But you got to know when having a really sharp and crisp edge, where to kind of soften edges out. There's just a lot of things to consider. Even when I'm using the lasso tool like I am now, I ultimately do smooth things over because things can tend to look a little bit the edges can look way too sharp when using it, so definitely, at least on organic things, such as, like the edges on clothing, or creatures or characters. Can just it can just look a little bit too sharp. It might be better for kind of like robots, or anything techy, I guess. Some technology in it. So now I'm just trying to add some color into the face. And see, it definitely did help to have the underpainting to work off of. And I have this this face I kind of used as a reference, because I'm not, I said it a lot, but I'm not I just can't really make up faces and have them rendered realistically without a good reference. So this is my interpretation of it, and that kind of all comes back to how you develop your personal style, is just taking a lot of drawing from life, or from photos, not as much as like others' paintings, but when you're just focusing on the painting, and you're doing a lot of it, you'll just do things in your own personal way, especially if you're not thinking about it. You just do it, based off of what you see, and your mind and hand will interpret things differently, and you'll start developing things on your own. One thing I like to do with a lot of the characters, though, and I find it, a challenge every time, is just have nice, soft-looking eyes. I don't need them at 7K resolution, super sharp and crisp, with every tear duct and pore, accented, highlighted, rendered out. I just like a nice, soft, painterly looking eye, and that's what I'm going for here. See, I'm using like this third brush now, which is kind of like a long, streaky one, but with the pen pressure setting, and you don't use too much pressure on your tablet, you can streak on some nice brush strokes that will vary up the color in your skin tones. Non-skin tones, it's definitely a difficult, and one of the things I think people have the hardest time coloring, just to their nature and complexity. But layering the color on the face is definitely the best way. Like that's just how you get rich colors in general, as well as if and that roots back to kind of like the eras of pointillism, where the artists of the time discovered you could make a more dynamic looking color when it's made up of all the little dots of different colors, but as long as together they're making up kind of like one color, then it definitely looks a lot more dynamic than just using one solid color, kind of like out of the color picker, or tube, so to speak. And so yeah, even though the skin in the light is warm in general, I'm going for, like, at least from the direct on right side, I'm going to start using cooler highlights, and that will be from like the energy blast she'll be emitting from her hands. So I'm starting to consider that at this level, and I'm not entirely committing to that even, but I'm starting to consider that. I think I still have to rotate this left eye here just a little bit. It's not exactly straight, but sometimes you don't see that until you step back for a couple minutes and then rotate it. So flip the canvas horizontally, every 10, 15 minutes if you can. That definitely helps. You notice I'm not even zooming in all that much. This is still probably only like a 50% on my screen in terms of its final size. So I try not to zoom in any further than I have to. I might zoom in at one more level to polish it up, but I'm not even sure I do. I kind of went with emerald green eyes. I think I'm going to make them blue. Green is just a whole new color in her scheme, and I want to reflect a little bit of the blue I have in it, so I think I'm going to change that when I go back and do the final edits on this. Now, once I have most of the base of things painted, that's when I go back on a new layer like this and just kind of fiddle with the highlights. And of course, it's always a careful, almost like ballet of hard and soft edges, what you choose to smudge and what you don't, when you use a soft brush versus a hard edge brush. It's just all the different strokes kind of playing with each other and trying to get them to harmonize within a face is probably the most difficult aspect of this all. Especially since I'm not exactly satisfied with how the anatomy underneath on my underpainting was looking at this point, so kind of adjusting that now. And see, I start off with those pale looking colors, but then I flip it and I notice they're not exactly right. So you sometimes have to go deeper and warmer. The trick is with anatomy and things in general is you want to get the underlying structure correct first before you doll it up and make it look pretty. That'd be like the one thing I'd say take away from this, if anything at all, is get the structure of something right first. If the structure's not working, the whole image will fall apart, or whatever aspect of it is wrong. I see the corner of the mouth and the nose is always one area I definitely struggle with. Should probably just do studies of that for like a day straight. That might fix that problem. You see, I'm just picking the colors too that I had to base right off the scarf, reflecting them in the lips to kind of harmonize the colors as a whole. Look at that face. She is so focused and serious on whatever she's doing. You see, I'll just make layer after layer when it comes up to like different parts as complex as this, and then once I at least convince myself I'm satisfied, then I'll flatten it and merge it down. Trying to do the cast shadow from that nose, considering they're going to have the harsh lighting from the hand coming kind of more or less on the right side of the painting now. Alright, finally now I'm going to attempt to paint this hair. And it looks really ugly at first, but I guess it goes with the territory. I make a new layer, of course, and I have it above the character so I can edit this shape and have it cut into the face different ways, but oh, the bangs are terrible right now. I'm just gonna fill those in. See, there's just something about hair. You probably can see this from how I'm painting this. I don't know. There's got to be something I'm missing. Some better way of doing it. Mine never looks pretty. So yeah, let's just make some hair going crazy over there, cause she's going wild. But yeah, I just smudge on some highlights. Just think of it as I mean, that anytime I read up on how to paint hair, it's just always painted in volumes. So that's just what I'm gonna say because I tried that, but I don't know. It takes a lot more finesse than that, I feel. So yeah, I pulled it out, and then what you're saying now, I made a selection to kind of make. I don't know what to call these, but they're little things in the front for her hair to go in. Just add some visual interest, kind of like an accessory. Then go back in and add some. See, the hair is looking a lot better. I don't know. I had to figure out what to do with the bangs. And that's some light coming across it. It'll take a little bit of work still, but it's coming. It's getting there. Alright, try this again. Add some of these overlapping hair strands. Then recede into the shadow. Go a little crazy out the back. And flip it again. See, there's a face error. That's how it was before. And then when I redrew it, and now I think it looks a lot better. I think I took a couple years off or two. See, before I even did that though, it looked, to me it looked fine at a glance, but I had to really just analyze it more. I was trying to get the cast shadows from underneath the hair, and of course that's super easy to do if your hair's on a layer above the face. So basically, this video was more than half of just painting the face, but I'm glad I kind of committed to that up, near the start of this to kind of, again, capture the essence of this character, and then, I'll work out like 85% of the rest of the design when I'm through with this, because it still leaves much to be desired. Now I'm just kind of having fun and getting a little more painterly with it. I don't know. Hyper realism, or even just super realism, isn't that exciting to me. It's more used in movie production art, but they'll just take stills of the actors or any kind of model and just paint armor over them and stuff like that. I don't know. I like having a fun painterly and illustration, aesthetic to my work. Finally going back in, adding some of those highlights and making the eyes look a little more filled with life. And it's like if I don't even have a good eye reference on the model sheet I'm using, I'll look up other artists' paintings, like how are they painting the eyes, so kind of get some ideas. But it's definitely coming there, so hope you enjoyed this and learned a thing or two, and I'll see you in the next part.